we're not a large organization. We're up to 35 or so employees, but at the same time, you spread them out over 4 different physical locations in a 40-mile radius or so from A to Z. You just can't be in 4 places at once, and so you really have to build out a network of trust among these guys.
Welcome to Peer Talk, a dialogue with business owners just like you. Peer Talk conversations run the gamut of business challenges facing owners today. The host of Peer Talk is Dan Crowley, founder and owner of Peer Executive Groups, which provides a safe space for owners to share their experience, grow their businesses, and learn from their peers.
Okay, welcome to Peer Talk. There are a number of great business owners out there, just like yourself, who would love to share their experiences with you, and we hope to give them a voice.
Rovi Tracker is proud to sponsor this episode of Peer Talk, the rental industry's premier podcast. Rovi Tracker does GPS tracking and maintenance alerts. We have a program for the rental industry that will save you 28%. Call us for a demo.
Welcome to Peer Talk. This is Dan Crowley. Today we have a very special guest, Dan Fielitz from General Rental in Ohio. They have 4 locations, and Dan started in the business back in 1997 when he joined his father John, and they went about operating rental operations in Ohio and expanding from 1 location to 4 locations. Today's topic will be about managing multiple locations, the metrics, the people, the systems. Welcome, Dan. Welcome to Peer Talk. Today we have Dan Fielitz from General Rental. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, Dan. How you doing today?
Excellent. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about managing multiple locations, something that Dan is very familiar with, right? So let's start. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got into the industry, your company, and how you got to this point so we can learn more about General Rental.
Sure. Hey, first, thanks for having me on, Dan. I appreciate it. And, hopefully somebody finds something useful out of this. I don't know, man.
Absolutely. Yeah.
My history, if you want to tell the story of our company, you got to go back actually a generation and start with my dad. So back in 1978, he opened his first rental yard in Worcester, Ohio. And he was a farmer that needed a set of acetylene torches. And he couldn't find them anywhere. And that was kind of the birthplace of that. So he went into business, got a family loan from a friend with an industry that we actually deal with, manufacturer and industry. And, I was born in 1979. So I've been around this industry my entire life. He sold out to a VC guy back in 1992, which then sold the company off to Nations Rent, which then sold out to Sunbelt. And along the way, they closed down some of the locations in our area. He had grown it to 4. The next fella then grew it out to up to 7 locations. And by the time Sunbelt was done, they were all closed. So that really left kind of a vacancy in our area. And just for perspective, we're about an hour south of Cleveland, about an hour and a half northeast of Columbus, kind of right along the Route 77, US 30 corridors there. That is where we are. So we bridge a really interesting area there where we're not exactly urban. We're not exactly agricultural. We're not, we're somewhat industrial. We got Republic Steel and Timken in our areas. So those are big manufacturing companies in our area there. So got a nice mix, but we're not too heavy in any one area. So then in 1996, we were approached by a small operator in the Massillon, Ohio area, which would be the sister city to Canton, Ohio, which is the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That's the big thing in our area. So the father was getting ready to retire, and the son had spun off a party and event rental business. And he didn't want anything to do with construction, homeowner, industrial work. He just wanted the party side. And he was looking for a buyer. And so I was a senior in high school, and I was getting ready to head out to college. And Dad said, "Hey, are you interested in this?" And I said, yeah, but I'm 17. What do I know about anything in the world? So, I started working there in December of 1996, just to kind of see if it was something that fit well. And in March of 97, we purchased the business. And in 1999, the Ventrac company, Venture Products, which is just recently been sold out to Toro, they're old friends of the family. They asked if we'd be interested in kind of a joint venture out in the Orville area, which is their home. And they said, hey, we're looking to build out a small tool sales side to help support our new Ventrac tractor. And would you be interested in bringing in the rental side? And after some hem-hawing around, that made some sense because that's only 3 miles from my hometown there. So we now had 2 branches in April of 99. In 2000, another local company in the North Canton area, the husband and wife that had been running that business for maybe 10 years were closing in on retirement and had some health issues. And they said, hey, we're either going to sell out to somebody else, or if you're interested, you can have this. So we got to 3 locations. And then in 2004, we just saw a need, an opportunity in the Worcester area, which is kind of the other direction. So now we had 2 county seats that we were operating in Wayne and Stark counties in Ohio. So that happened quickly, and putting things in perspective. So I'm in my early 20s, and it was a real interesting learning curve on that. And I was trying to go to college at the same time, and we were experiencing this rapid growth, and life just kept on happening. I got married, had kids along the way. And then in 2009, my first daughter was coming on, and we were getting a new computer system. And Dad said, you know what? I'm just not coming in on Monday. And that was our succession plan.
Wow.
So that pretty much brings you up to where we are today. Just things have been happening. It sounds haphazard, but it's, looking back on it, it's worked out well so far. So
that Worcester location, that was 2009, did you say?
2004.
2004. Okay.
Yeah.
So 15 years ago. So, been operating 4 operations for 15 years
Right.
Yeah. So that's actually a good place to start. So your role, at what point were you essentially, I'm assuming you worked with the store managers. You had store managers at each location?
Yeah. So, I would operate as kind of the XO, the right-hand man to Dad, who was a real entrepreneur. He saw an opportunity, he'd chase it. But that didn't always lead to organization. That was, an opportunity presented itself, let's go after it. And he would be able to lean on me and, well, how do we make this happen type thing. So I was operating as kind of an assistant manager. And then through personnel changes, I was a branch manager at North Canton. And then when we got somebody in up there, I went out to Orville for a while. And then, just kind of transitioned along the way. And one of the things I really realized in 2008 and 2009 was we had to just transition away from, John Fielitz Incorporated to General Rental.
Correct.
And it couldn't be, Dan Fielitz Incorporated, or else it would be the same frustrations I've been dealing with all along. So that was one of the early transitions. Yeah.
Got it. So about that time is when you kind of came up with the new name and started to kind of brand yourself together as General Rental. Your logo actually looks like it might be younger than that. Did you do that logo more recently than 15 years?
I put that together in 2003 or 2.
Oh my gosh. That looks great. It looks, surprisingly fresh.
Well, I got to be honest. I got to talk to my sisters about that because I leaned on them heavy for input. So they're
there you go.
I am. Yeah.
So are these locations now? Do you have a general manager in each store, or a
branch manager? And now we've also kind of added in a general manager to help oversee, kind of loosen the burden on me a little bit.
Okay. So talk about the difference between your role and your general manager's role. What does that person do for you versus what you're currently doing?
So he's really, if we really talk about it in terms of traction, as it were, we were trying to build out that model before we had even read the book. But really, he's operating as an integrator.
So traction, integrator. You say, so you're referring to the book by Gino Wickman, which is about building an entrepreneurial operating system.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And I think we were already heading in that direction before that, before EOS came on my radar. We were already identifying that it can't, you just have to share the responsibility, and we're not a large organization. We're up to 35 or so employees, but at the same time, you spread them out over 4 different physical locations in a 40-mile radius or so from A to Z. You just can't be in 4 places at once, and so you really have to build out a network of trust among these guys. And then, EOS has kind of taught us that we need to also identify numbers and identify a way to prove, how are they doing? And it has to be more than just kind of licking your thumb and sticking it up in the air and testing the breeze. So
that's excellent. So that's a good point. So we're going to get into metrics a little bit further in the conversation, and I'm dying to find out how you look at progress and performance in those operations. But let me ask you this: like, if I flying over the business, seeing the 4 locations, how do they differ from each other, if they differ at all? Do they serve, like, in my mind, you picture an independent equipment rental operator goes 20 miles in every direction or 10 miles in every direction, and they might have a category of assets that includes compact equipment as well as a little bit of lift, and may focus in specific market categories. How are the 4 similar or different from each other?
They really do operate as 4 individual businesses in closer proximity. We share equipment back and forth a lot, and that's one of the struggles. But we have centralized a few things in order to deliver some of our aerials. We've kind of put all of our main transportation at one location, so the semi and our tandem rollbacks are sitting at one location.
One location, got it.
Yeah, but it has the best location for access to a main highway, so you can get in and out pretty quick and easy out of there. But other than that, they really are relatively similar. The differences really would come down to the markets that they serve. If you look at Massillon and North Canton, we are in a considerably more urban retail environment. Worcester is similar to that. Orville is kind of out in the middle of nowhere, but we have a really interesting oddity there, that we have a large Amish population to the south of us, and so they travel into the larger urban areas like in Akron or Cleveland, and they will use us as a waypoint to pick something up along the way.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So having the trucks in one location, moving some of the bigger assets, you don't seem to have too much problem with that. The distance between the 4 locations,
I think it's from Worcester to North Canton would be the longest drive, and that's maybe a 40-minute drive, 45-minute drive from A to Z. Okay. Mile wise, I'd say it's probably 30 miles or so, 40 miles.
Got it. Okay. And we have, we have people with multiple locations that do different things to kind of become as efficient as they can throughout the day. We have a couple that have what I would call central hubs, where they create a war room, and they might have a central phone bank where they're actually keeping track of assets and the movement of the assets. Do your stores own those assets, or how is that managed? Like, is it like one central pool of assets, and then they have a home, or is it kind of more just all one working together as one?
So the business structure, we are incorporated, and they're all 4 branch locations of one corporation. So at the end of the day, they are all owned by one entity. They do have home base locations where, we probably should do a better job of tracking, internal sub-rentals, but we really just share stuff back and forth is how that works. It'd be like a glorified stock room that you can take something in and out of. As far as a hub and spoke, our Massillon branch, being the oldest and probably building-wise one of the largest and best suited for it, we do most of our stocking out of there. So we'll do some centralized parts ordering. We have been working on building out an actual purchasing agent that does a lot of the centralized repair orders and merchandise inventory restocking.
Oh, excellent.
And kind of working on that. But that's, that we started building that out in January of 2020, and then COVID hit. So things really hit the bricks there, and we haven't really built that out the way it should be to be fully efficient.
I've often wanted to do a very targeted peer group around, obviously, because that's our business, right? But I would love to do a multi-site, and how different operators around the country are identifying efficiencies, whether it be central service and repair, just different things around asset movement and managing of that. I think that would be really neat to have 10 people in the room and kind of just sharing for a day on the different things they're doing to cut some of the what I would call central overhead costs out of the equation, so that they can be, more profitable with 4 stores than 1 store, right? So owning 4 individual stores is one thing, but you don't really get the advantage till you start to make change.
That's exactly right. And I think communication is the biggest struggle there. We've just this last month introduced a unified communication system where in the past we had 4 different traditional PBX phone banks at each location.
Gotcha.
And now we've just introduced, we've gone with a unified solution so that we can send calls back and forth. We can call extension to extension in-house. And that, when we were rolling that out, guys were out of their minds excited about the opportunity to get away from some of the frustrations, since we are so close, when we do share stuff back and forth.
Sure.
If I'm out of let's say a plate compactor, and I'm all out of those at this branch today. Well, hey, I've got one here. It's a 20-minute drive over there. Are you willing to run over there? Sure, you betcha. Now, how do I make that happen inside? Part of that is a sales discussion. Part of it is logistics discussion. We're talking about, do I want to hang up the phone and have that trust that customer is going to call that other branch, or do I want to make that reservation and then confirm availability with the other branch? Can I trust that this piece isn't on a repair order and that it is available as it says, or that the scheduling isn't as tight as I think it is, or it's tighter than I think it is? That whole frustration is probably the lion's share. It's always communication, man. It's always communication.
That's amazing. And it's so funny because what you're speaking of, there's so much at risk, right? So it's kind of like you could see in any given month the opportunity to kind of botch an opportunity, right? So you want to make sure that happens. And I would say one of the interesting things about this pandemic is we are getting exposed to using technology for different purposes. We have one of our members has 3 locations in Pennsylvania, and when they got to the second and third location, it was such a interesting move. They put these big monitors at the end of each counter, and so they left them on 24/7, and so you could literally talk to the counter that might be 30 miles away on your left, or talk to the counter that might be 20 miles another direction on your right. So these guys would lean in and they'd look in the camera and say, "Hey, Jim, are you there? Can I ask you a question?" So it was kind of neat. I thought that was a unique way to deal with that communication issue.
Well, that's great, because then it would save me from even picking up the phone and dialing over and say, going into the on hold or going into the voicemail, when I can just look in the camera and see, oh man, these guys are all on the phone right now. That's genius. That's a smart guy.
And then you also wonder, now you use point of rental?
I do.
You do. And are you your enterprise or which?
We're at the expert level, the mid-tier level. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And that's where it's like, you can almost see where this is all headed, where the ability to have multiple monitors in front of you, to be able to see multiple stores, understand what's available to you. It's the drill down ability to say, and I'm of course I'm thinking of a 4-store operation, but I'm also thinking of an 8-store operation, right? How does this benefit? And ultimately, there is definitely a time constraint and a distance constraint on managing, those operations working together. So I get that.
And there's just so many layers to it that are interesting to that too. And I think that, point of rental, we just came over to them in November of 2019. We had been with another company and we loved them, but they just didn't have some of the options that we wanted, and Point of Rental was able to offer those. There's different modules along the way, and you're looking at that as this the pinnacle where someday I can add this in and someday I can add this module in and all that. And you can see these increased efficiencies along the way. And that's really where you start to have some real fun with that.
Absolutely. So you have these different branch managers. Now you have the general manager. You can kind of see that your role from an EOS perspective is to be the visionary and kind of use the general manager maybe more in an integrator or an implementer role. Is that kind of how you're structured, or are you using yourself differently than your general manager?
Yeah, I'm probably part-time integrator. He's
Gotcha.
Part-time integrator.
Okay.
The goal would be to get him out of, needed daily functions and allow him to actually operate as a full-time integrator and allow me to step out completely. But we're not quite there yet.
And then you guys have been looking at metrics. So let's kind of move over to that metrics, that scorecard.
Dan, I want to be real clear up front with you, man. The scorecard has been a frustration to me because I have not done well at this. And anybody listening, please don't listen to what I have to say next.
Well, we're going to touch on it anyway, because that's where we got to go where the pain's at, right?
It hurts.
So it does hurt, but it is interesting because branch management, we're seeing it around the country with the independents. It is becoming more streamlined. In fact, we're having a roundtable. It's a virtual roundtable strictly for branch management that's available in December and January. There's a quick plug, but anyone can attend. You don't have to be a peer group member. We just make sure that there's only 10 per session. But yeah, it has to do with, as a branch manager, what is my role and responsibility? How, not just interacting at the store level, but how do I interact with the general management level? What am I responsible for feeding data upstream and or being held accountable for, right? So in your case, they're actually obviously looking at you're looking, and I don't know how deep you've gotten on this, but like you're going to look at your hourly utilization. You're going to look at your categories of assets at that store and see how things are being utilized. But does that mean that the asset has to be at that home base? It's not in a central, right? So how do you deal with that?
That's exactly the issue. It seems like so often I start putting these metrics together and start trying to identify, how does this work? But with our model and the way that we're operating right now, it's completely unfair for me to hold somebody accountable to a number that they have almost no authority over. They have almost no control over. If the customer, with our close locations, it is very common for a customer to pick up something at one branch and take it back to a different branch. Sure, we can try and turn the screws and force somebody to take it back to that home base, but then with Point of Rental, when you close out that order at the other branch, that branch receives the revenue. So now I'm left with a choice: either let it set or spend more time in the office making general ledger entries or making corrections.
Gotcha.
And if I dig in that deep, we could probably make the time for it, but we just haven't found a way to make the time for that right now. So I have really struggled with that, with measuring utilization, saying, well, this thing's out 120%. It's got 120% utilization. Yeah, because it's being shared from A to B to C to D, and that's an obvious point. But there are other things where it's extremely low. We're sharing it.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge, right? You've had 4 operations for a number of years, but you've recently changed your management software. So it's kind of almost like you're starting fresh and saying, how do we manage? How do we look at metrics? How much time do we waste on proper reporting versus, hey, getting the job done, getting the assets out of the yard and out on the project sites.
Yeah.
Now in your branches, do you have mechanics in every branch, or do you have more of a central? I know you mentioned you had some where specific assets will be taken to the main location.
So we've been kicking around the centralized shop idea, and I know a lot of guys have a lot of strong feelings one way or the other, or it's a pipe dream that someday I'd like to get to it. And what we've done really is tried to home base some of the more complicated systems with our, higher dollar techs or our more skilled and experienced techs in one location, so that all of those orders kind of ship or are received back into that area. So you've got the qualified people to put their hands on it. We do have mechanics at each branch, obviously, but they're not all tier 3, high end mechanics. Some of these guys are small engine guys. Some of these guys are focused more on, small electronics, but you have to have somebody somewhere. And so our answer to that was, well, it's not a true centralized shop, but it is kind of a centralization of the knowledge in one area.
Now, do those people, do they, from a coaching perspective or an evaluation perspective, is the branch manager active in that, or does the branch manager really run counter and some of the general duties on a branch, and then leave kind of the development of the staff to the overall general manager or yourself? Where does that go? Is the branch manager managing all the human resources in their particular site, or is it more spread amongst the company?
Yeah, so the branch manager is ultimately responsible for, we boil it down to knowing our people, knowing our equipment, knowing our facility. And you can break it out into a lot of different buzzwords, but really we want them to know what's going on with the customer base, who's coming in and out the door, and what they're looking for to make sure we're satisfying their needs. Operationally, we're making sure that they've got the right people in the right seat, to go back to an EOS term, that can really do the work of the daily functions in there. And then also, they're kind of facility managers. Hey, we got a leak in the roof over here, or, I need to get this piece of concrete replaced, whatever it may be. That's really their responsibilities. General manager really is kind of the guy pulling the heavy lifting on that. He's responsible for the training calendar. He's responsible for the OSHA safety requirements and some of that stuff. But even that, really, that's not his strong suit either. And I don't want him dragged down into that area that much either. So that's why we're looking at transitioning over to professional employment organization to really build out HR.
A PEO. So essentially that would be an entity that would act as your almost outsource human resource management.
Yeah. I mean,
neat.
There's some places for that. Yeah. For us, at that 35 person area, we can't quite justify a full-time HR department, but also we need to be able to have somebody to answer the phone when a guy's got a new baby, or he breaks his arm, or he wants to change his withholding taxes or whatever. So, right now it's being handled by my office manager, but that's not really her training. So
good. That's a good point. I see a number of people look at PEO and they balk due to cost. But when you're in a position where you're growing your business and you're looking at adding a staff person because things have gotten so much bigger and more support. I mean, you're over 30 employees now. So comparing that new hire in the HR area versus using an outsourced solution or even a PEO where you're, they're leasing the employees and you're leasing them from the PEO company. I could see the potential for that. I know a couple people who use PEO and have used them forever. And even though it looks like a big expense on their income statement, it actually is replacing an FTE or a body count. So they can justify the cost of that relationship for sure.
Exactly. It really does come down to, okay, if I'm looking at hiring a full-time person, it's going to cost me this much. To add on this service, it's going to cost me this much. It's a net savings for me, let alone the upside of, this year, anybody listening to this didn't know what to do most of the time with their response to COVID. We didn't know what to tell guys or how to tell it to them. How are you exposed? How are you supposed to handle this? And we were crowdsourcing that through I'm sure a lot of guys listening to this probably did the same thing we did. We were having weekly calls in our bag meeting, our weekly bag meeting, where we're trying to share, hey, this is what I heard. This is what I'm supposed to do. But to have somebody that does this professionally and is paying attention to that and has a wider range of resources, and I can tap into that, that's got some real value to me. Let alone easing that onboarding or exiting. There's just so many upsides to it for me, for us, but some guys might not like it.
No, I think it's great, and we have been running into people strategy issues big time this fall with all of our peer group meetings. We've created the HR scorecard where people are able to say, okay, on these 20 different levels of managing people, where are we good and where we still need to build a system? And then, of course, if you're implementing your EOS, you have the ability to kind of make it a rock and put it in place in your company. So I think, there's no question I can see that being where people spend a lot of energy, especially with, even though have a lot of unemployment in this country, the skilled jobs are filled, right?
They are.
So we need technicians or people to work in the company, we're having trouble finding the people who will stick. So no question. Now let's segue real quickly, because we're going to end this up, but I want to briefly touch upon any ideas and or uses around new technologies. I know GPS has become more prevalent with GPS Locator is one of our vendors. We have Rovi Tracker sponsoring this particular podcast, and making sure that they have GPS on certain systems. As you have your equipment a bigger and bigger fleet, and the fleet's out more and more and more, have you looked at new technologies and anything to help you to manage those assets?
I think the things I'm looking for or I'm looking at are, inventory management. Like I said, we share things back and forth. You can think you have something in some place, go to the shelf, and it's not there, only to find out that it's been replaced, returned somewhere else, and whatever, somehow it's not there. So that is one of our biggest holdups right now. It's a real frustration. So I've looked at either putting a QR code or a barcode on every piece of equipment, and then getting tablets in the back for the yard guys and the techs to kind of track that through. You can, I believe, with Point of Rental or Record 360, you can timestamp and geostamp where certain functions were done. So you can say that's in. Only problem with that is, this stuff is all being used. So those stickers, those barcodes, those Q codes might not be legible. So it's not the right answer all the time.
Correct.
So I've kicked around the idea. They make these RFID tracker bugs. I've looked into that because there are, obviously on larger things, GPS, that makes a ton of sense on a skid steer or on an excavator, boom lift. But if I'm also sending out let's go back to the plate compactor, where am I going to put that thing on there and not have it rattle loose? So they make, RFID trackers in different, forms where you can go as simple as, once again, a handheld scanner that would just record it in, or they even make them over your entry and exit gates. So to kind of timestamp it as it goes in and out, what you've got there. So I'm in the early stages looking at that, but I'm looking for an answer, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is interesting. And it's not just that. You're seeing companies pop up like Record 360, which is, helping people to better serve the customer by better serving yourself, protecting yourself legally, pictures being attached to files, that kind of thing. More and more of those types of uses of technology in the future. And it'll be interesting to see where that ends up. The old question of how do I manage assets amongst multiple locations will always be a topic of discussion. I don't know that there's anything very simple about it, but at some point you do need to commit to a vision for yourself. So tell us about your future. How do you see things changing? Hopefully we're going to come out of the pandemic at some point, but what's going to happen with general rental? Are you, from a system standpoint, from an expansion or personnel standpoint, what do you see in the future for you?
Onward and upward in 2021. We have a lot of reason for optimism, and I'm just a generally optimistic guy, but I feel like, 2020 was a blip. It was an odd year from a lot of perspectives. Yeah. And I just take it as a one-off. I could be mistaken, but I don't think I am. We have been gearing up. I feel for the type of business, the rental industry is so varied. There are so many different niches that you can fit into. So for our particular model and how we operate, there's room for opportunity in a lot of markets around us. And we feel like we've identified a couple that we'd like to move into. But before we do that, we're really focused on doing what we do now better and really doing it well. Stop shooting ourselves in the foot with, forgetting to send out a key or not putting the pin in that auger bit, whatever it may be, really building the systems around that. Because, we're talking about technology. So often a lot of this stuff is great, but you got to have the system in place to use it for your people before technology can make anything work. Computers fail, but the system, the process has to be sound. It should operate regardless of any technology that comes along.
Good point.
That's what we're working on right now. Is I've spent an inordinate amount of time building out an SOP manual, a daily procedures manual, and it is a constant work in progress. But really giving us a training manual that says, "Hey, this is how we do this every time." And so if we do inject a new piece of technology in there, it can only make that system easier or more efficient, but it can't fix the problem. That's what the process or the procedure is in place for. That's what we're working on right now.
Excellent.
As we continue.
Well, Dan Fielitz, I know that you are committed to your EOS implementation, and my guess is that you will have great employee retention and also be recruiting people, because you do have those types of commitments to improvement and communication with your employees. And of course, any employee is going to want to work at a company where they know they'll be heard. So we appreciate what you brought to the table today for us. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I hope it was useful.
I'm sure it was. Appreciate it. Thanks. Dan Fielitz from General Rental. Thank you.
Movie Tracker is proud to sponsor this episode of Pure Talk, the rental industry's premier podcast. Movie Tracker does GPS tracking for rental equipment. When you hear, "Where is this equipment?" that costs your company $18 each time. Stop the bleeding. Call us for a demo.
You've been listening to Peer Talk from Peer Executive Groups, produced and directed by Noah Crowley and hosted by Dan Crowley. Subscribe to this podcast for notifications of future episodes of Peer Talk.